Hello, this is Yogeshwar 7000 again, and I am back today with a very important topic, like always. And we'll be discussing about nature of people and how we can determine the nature or what kind of a person is through astrology. And this is a very important tool, as we know, because if we have access to somebody's birth chart, we can determine about his basic nature, his basic characteristics by studying his horoscope. So first of all, we have to determine as what are the basic natures, different basic natures. What are they characterized into as per ancient scriptures described in Eastern spiritualism, so as to say. I will not say Hindu, but it's kind of an Eastern thing. So first let's determine as to what the different natures are characterized under. And when we say nature, the Sanskrit word is guna. So, but as a generic word, let's use nature. So there are three basic gunas or natures as per the ancient scriptures described to us by the great sages. And those three basic characteristics or nature or gunas are sattva guna, rajas guna, and tamas guna. Now for people from the West, sattva you can write down in English and then try to pronounce it. Sattva is S-A-T-W-A. So that's sattva. And the second guna or nature is rajas guna, which is written as R-A-J-A-S, and try to pronounce that way. And the third guna is tamas. So write down T-A-M-A-S and try to pronounce it that way. So these are the three basic gunas or characteristics or nature of people described as per the ancient scriptures. Now, people can have sattva guna, rajas guna, and tamas guna, but there would not be a situation where a person is completely endowed with either sattva guna or rajas guna or tamas guna. A person generally will have a mixture of all the three gunas, and for some there will be a higher percentage of sattva guna, for some there may be a higher percentage of rajas, or for some there may be a higher percentage of tamas guna. And based on the percentages or the influence of tamas, rajas, and sattva guna, you can determine kind of the basic characteristics of the person. And each of these gunas or nature or characteristics as described are connected with a particular planet, and that's how we're discussing it through the eyes of Vedic astrology. I mean, you'll find saints out there who will talk about these gunas, sattva guna, tamas guna, and rajas guna, without bringing in the planets. And that's okay, I mean, you can determine a person is sattvic having sattva guna, or rajasic having rajas guna, or tamasic having tamas guna, without even discussing astrology, Vedic astrology, or the planets. But the ancient sages have very, very clearly given a connection between the planets and these three gunas. So that's how it becomes extremely important for us to understand, because then again it becomes a very important tool for us to understand a person just by looking at his chart. So let's see what sattva guna actually is. The sattva guna is a very pure kind of a nature. It does not have a lot of defects, and it's kind of a guna which you can associate with an enlightened person. His whole approach to life, his way of working, his way of coming across, his way of thinking, he will be extremely pure, pure from the five major, or rather six major defects of humans, like kama, krodha, lobha, moha, and ahankara. Kama is desires, krodha is anger, lobha is greed, kama, krodha, lobha. Moha is attachment, ahankara is too much ego, and matsya is too much jealousy, or rather jealousy. Kama, krodha, lobha, moha, ahankara, and the sixth one is matsya, which is jealousy. So if a person is kind of clear of these major weaknesses, again, these major six weaknesses have been described by the ancient scriptures, and we can go into details in another video about this part. But in case a person is kind of has elevated himself or transcended from these six basic weaknesses a person has, then he is considered to be an extremely sattvic person. However, just like I explained, that we will all have all the three characteristics or nature or gunas, which are sattva, rajas, and tamas. It wouldn't be as if a person has just one. And why? There is a logical reason. Because there's a connection of planets with these gunas, and in our birth charts we have all these planets which are representative of sattva, rajas, and tamas. Therefore, they are a part of our lives. But yes, the content of these guna will make a person rather influenced by a guna more. So if a person is clear, pure, and he is elevated himself from these weaknesses, generally we'll call him, oh, he's a very sattvic person, because he's got a lot of sattva guna. So I hope I'm making myself clear here. And a sattvic person, as per the sages, is at a higher level of consciousness, where he attains a lot of peace, good health, and he's most of the time joyful. He's not into these negative emotions which people experience. Now, the second category is the rajas category, or rajas guna, which is making a person rajasic. That's how it's called, rajasic. But the guna is rajas. Some people call it rajo, but rajas, rajas, is something which you can explain it with. Here, a person is influenced by desires. So the earlier sattva guna is more about spiritual knowledge, clearing himself of the weaknesses, and he's in a joyful state. Here it is about desires, or enjoying the sensual things in life, or desires. So if you think of it, out of these six weaknesses, kama, krodha, lobha, moha, so kama is desire, so that comes into play here. And then lobha is again desire. It's connected with kama because it could be a greed related to attaining more and more materialistic things so that one can enjoy them. So these little weaknesses come into play, and here a rajasic person, or rajas guna, will give him an extreme desire to go ahead and enjoy and do bhoga. Bhoga is enjoyment in Sanskrit, the worldly things rather. And then again, as compared to sattva guna, he is not in a good state of health, because when you start enjoying, you start to lose your energy, and then your health goes down. So it makes some kind of an impact on your health. You're not at a highest level of consciousness, or you're not clear and pure. So again, your mental way of thinking and your energy levels mentally also, and on an emotional level, also get disturbed. And other than just health, the entire consciousness suffers as well, because the more you enjoy, the more you have desires, the more you have greed. However, there is some kind of enlightenment here, not as compared to the sattva people or the sattvic people, but there's some kind of an enlightenment here. It's not as if the person does not understand himself. He understands, he's very clear about who he is, where he's coming from, and what is the spiritual side of life. But he chooses, he decides that no, I have a desire for possessing things and to enjoy things, the worldly things. So he makes that choice. And in that process, of course, he's not as joyful and as healthy mentally or emotionally as compared to the sattvic people. But that's his choice. Now, the third category in the gunas is the tamas guna, which is complete darkness. So here there is also a desire of attaining worldly things, possessing worldly things and enjoying them. But here he loses his ability to decide whether he attains those worldly desires through good means or bad means. So he's going to be kind of a person that everything is fair and love and war, and so he may use illegal means to attain his desires. So for that, he could use anything. On a physical level, he can just go out and be a thief. On a spiritual level also, he can go out to be a very powerful tantric who uses tantra or those evil powers, evil spiritual powers, or dark, I wouldn't say evil, dark spiritual powers for attainment of his materialistic desires and fulfillment. And in that process, he loses his ability to differentiate between good and bad, and then he enters into bad karma. But he's not thinking about karma at that level. He's just thinking, let me go ahead, get it and enjoy it. So in the process, he's actually in a dark state of mind, because he's actually enjoying, but he is creating bad karma for himself. So he's a tamasic person that way. So as an analogy, you can explain it as a bulb, a light bulb, which is giving just enough light which is required in a room, that can be characterized as the sattva guna, that there is enough light which is required. So that is sattva guna. I'm just giving it as an analogy. And if you think of a bulb which is giving too much light, which blinds you, that can be characterized as a rajas guna. And when there's no light, complete darkness in a room, that can be associated as tamas guna, or associated with tamasic people. So here, rajasic and tamasic both are blinded. Rajasic could be said to be blinded by extreme light, and tamas is complete darkness, zero light. And everybody, like I said, has these gunas, but what normally the sages have described is that we have to keep increasing our sattva guna so that we can transcend or elevate ourselves from these weaknesses which are experienced through these two gunas, which are rajas and tamas. Now, coming to the planets. As per the ancient sages, I'm not saying this out of my imagination, this is from the ancient scriptures and from the ancient sages, that Sun and Moon and Jupiter are sattvic planets. They are full of sattva guna. So they don't have rajas or they don't have tamas in it. So look at a chart and see what's the placement of Sun, Moon and Jupiter, and you'll be able to know what kind of a sattvic guna or a sattvic nature that person has. The other planets, Venus and Mercury, are rajasic planets. So look at those planets there, and in a birth chart, and you'll be able to figure out as to how much of a rajas that person has, meaning which, how much is it of a person, how much of a desire that person has, as compared to getting enlightened and transcending beyond these basic necessities and desires of life and attaining that pure consciousness. So Venus and Mercury are rajasic. Of course, they are not tamasic. So they would also like to attain materialistic things and worldly things through rightful means and then enjoy them. And the third category is tamasic, and they are characterized with the planets Mars and Saturn. And here they are complete dark planets, because they will not determine whether they are attaining these desires through rightful means or not. Whether it's good or bad, they want what they want, and it's not necessarily the materialistic desires. Their own desires could be sometimes spiritual as well. So that is the difference here. Now Venus, of course, as we know, is about enjoyment, about sexual pleasures, so that's a Rajas element there. Mercury, as we know, they're about attaining money, the stock markets, element of, again, Rajas element, and then, you know, attaining it. Here Mars is a hot planet. It's about fire, it's about anger, it's about a warrior who goes to wars and, you know, goes and gets it. And like I said, everything is fair in love and war, so he'll use his whole force and energy to go and get what he wants. And Saturn, again, you know, he can get into a mood where he can inflict. Saturn is associated with sorrow, or so he can inflict sorrow and pain on somebody, or is sometimes his own self. So he can be also associated with another tamas guna, which, you know, he uses his nature and his characteristics to get what he wants, but through the tools he has, rather, so as to say. But since these planets are all, like I mentioned, all of these 9 planets which I just mentioned, they are placed in a birth chart, and that's the reason why logically you can explain it, that yes, we have all of these 3 gunas in ourselves, but we have to see as to what planet is the influencing planet, which influences us most. So what's our basic nature, what's our main nature, what's the influencing part in ourselves. And it's beautifully explained here by the sages that, you know, Sun and Moon and Jupiter, Sattva, Venus, Mercury, Rajas, Mars and Saturn, Tamas. Let's come to Rahu and Ketu. Again, Rahu and Ketu, extremely tamasic planets. Out of these 9 we discussed 7, but Rahu and Ketu both are extremely tamasic, because they'll go after their desires, and they're in complete darkness. They're not going to think about good bad karma. They're just gonna go out there and get what they want. But here, you know, there's a slight difference between Rahu is purely about materialistic desires on a worldly level. Ketu is about spiritual desires. So being spiritual also, there's a difference between the spirituality of Jupiter and the spirituality of Ketu. Ketu is going to go into Tantra. So he's going to use spiritual powers to go and get the powers of spiritual strong mantras to go and get what he wants. That's very different from Jupiter. So here's the difference. And Rahu, of course, he creates, you know, huge materialistic desires, and he'll go out and get them without even thinking or blinking an eyelid as to how he got them. Like large hotels, casinos, gambling dens, drugs. That's also one level of a tamasic planet. So hopefully I explained myself here. If you have questions, feel free to give me you can give me a call, because I haven't mentioned my phone number here, but you can send me an email. And in the meanwhile, I will recommend subscribe to my channel. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, and I will and check out my website, by the way. There's a link below, and I will see you soon with an interesting topic. Goodbye.